Are you ready to turn your potential into performance? If so, you're in the right place. This is the Coach Bru Show, and here's your host, John Brubaker.
Welcome to the Coach Bru Show Performance Report, episode number 500. Yesterday's underdog is tomorrow's champion. But before we jump into this week's podcast, we need to get one thing out of the way first. An article I wrote, or an episode of this podcast you may have listened to last week, or both, ruffled some feathers. Within it was one simple statement about an uncomfortable truth: gender discrimination in the workplace. And an interesting thing happened. A lot of people unsubscribed. There's a link on my website to that article if you missed it last week, or you can go to just search Huffington Post, go to the HuffingtonPost.com and search Coach Bru. But it was as I looked a little deeper at the unsubscribes, because that number jumped out at me, I noticed something interesting. 95% of them were men. Now, this is proof there's a real problem. An article, which is about a strong, successful female entrepreneur, which was intended to inspire you, male or female, to blaze your own trail, was met with high unsubscribes. So basically, people who aren't willing to admit there's a problem are in fact a big part of the problem. Be better than that, folks. On the flip side, speaking of being better, I received countless replies, voicemails, direct messages on Twitter and Facebook from men and women alike thanking me for writing about that subject. So thank you. If you're listening and you wrote in, emailed me, thank you so much. Furthermore, the article wasn't just published on my blog and my newsletter and this podcast. It was picked up by the Huffington Post and is my most widely read and shared article to date. Let that sink in for a minute. So, on to this week, episode 500. Yesterday's underdog is tomorrow's champion. I don't shy away from difficult topics or causes I care about. Neither should you. Case in point, last week, that'd be playing small, and we're all built for playing a bigger game. This week, I want to share a lesson with you from someone who, while he's absolutely at the top of his game, is still an outsider and still an underdog. He's not part of the, quote, establishment in his industry. And if you have to do more with less resources, you can probably relate. I know I can. He's just like that coach of the underfunded team, the independent agent at the small firm, or, the upstart at a lesser known company. Now, if you've read my book, Seeds of Success, I'm not a fan of award shows. There's actually a whole chapter in the book dedicated to that very subject, but let me boil it down for you into one simple sentence. Why be a passive observer to others' success when you can be an active participant in your own? On the night of November 8th, last Wednesday night, the 51st Country Music Awards took place at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, Tennessee. While a who's who of entertainers attended and performed at the event, there was one artist who was left on the outside looking in. Literally. Sturgill Simpson. Sturgill Simpson was outside the front doors of the arena, busking with his guitar case open and a small sign in it that read, "Struggling country singer, anything helps." Now, if you never heard of the name Sturgill Simpson, I'm not surprised. But the irony of him doing so is that Sturgill's perhaps the most stadium status artist in country music. He won the 2017 Grammy Award for Best Country Album. And his Grammy trophy was sitting in his guitar case next to that sign while he was busking. Regardless, he went almost completely unnoticed, playing outside the entrance of Bridgestone Arena as fans are pouring into the CMA Awards. And after an hour of busking, he only made $13 in tips. Now, you might be wondering, how then did he win a Grammy? Well, I'm glad you asked. The Grammys are not an award that can be bought or manipulated by, quote, the establishment. You're nominated and voted on exclusively by your professional peers, fellow artists and musicians. It's purely merit-based and can't be bought. Side note, unlike the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today bestseller list, for authors with deep pockets and shallow egos, you can buy your way onto that list. And it's what happens is, there's a company called Result Source. And basically, authors can hire that company to get them on the bestseller list. And the way it works is Result Source basically requires authors to make bulk purchases of their books. Like, you front the money up front. And the only reason I know this is there's an expose written in the Wall Street Journal and Forbes magazine, both, about how shady this operation is. They're based out of San Diego. Anyway, they then break up those orders into small increments, scatter them about the country, different large and small retailers, trying to make it look like organic retail sales. And authors or their publishers will pay tens of thousands of dollars on top of the cost of the books, I might add, basically for Result Source to buy them, a spot on the New York Times or Wall Street Journal bestseller list. And that price tag can be upwards of $250,000, which is just crazy to me. But back to the subject at hand, Sturgill Simpson and the Grammys, totally merit-based. It's not something that can be bought. What's interesting with Sturgill is he wasn't bothered by the fact that he wasn't nominated for CMA or even invited to attend. Instead, I think we're all in this story. Instead, he used the event as an opportunity. A Google search of his name plus CMA Awards revealed 216,000 hits, 216,000 results when I searched that. Every major media outlet in the country, like Time Magazine, Rolling Stone, Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, covered what Simpson did that night. An entrepreneur who couldn't get much attention inside his industry attracted plenty of it outside his industry. Think about that for a minute. Think about that. He got all that press and he didn't even attend, much less win an award or perform there. At least not inside. And that's by far more attention than any artist who was actually in attendance received. They are each simply one face, one fairly anonymous face in a large crowd that night. What was cool about what Sturgill did was he teased his performance by posting the following message on his Facebook page. He recorded this all on Facebook Live. So he wrote, I'm quoting him, "So excited to be playing the hashtag CMA Awards tonight. Going to be doing a little busking out front. Come down and join me." And while just a handful of his fans joined in person, over 79,000 people joined him by watching online on his Facebook live stream. The game's changed, folks. It's absolutely changed. Now, Simpson has really good perspective. He doesn't need the outside validation of others. And that's something he learned from one of his mentors. I remember hearing him mention this in an interview. And he went to visit Merle Haggard once, country legend Merle Haggard. And when he gets up on the front porch of the house and he's about to knock on the front door, he sees Haggard using his Grammy Award. Haggard has had one Grammy Award, one single Grammy at the time. He was using his Grammy Award trophy as a doorstop on his front door. Talk about a guy who knew life is about the rewards, not the awards. Now, Sturgill's an underdog, just like the rest of us. And I told you earlier, I think we're all in this story. And, his career really resonates with me because music's actually a second career for him after careers in the Navy and with Union Pacific Railroad. And, I'm a performer in my own right in terms of my speaking and, writing, coaching career. And it's a second career for me after spending 12 years as a college coach and professor. So what I love about Sturgill is he's living proof that yesterday's underdog can indeed be tomorrow's champion. And I hope seeing what he's done, more with less, being that outsider and that underdog, not a part of the quote establishment. Hope that inspires you to do more with less in your career, in your industry. Because really, unless you're Google or Nike or an employee of one of those firms, unless you're one of those number one top dog industry leaders, you're an underdog. We're all, for the most part, underdogs. So I want to get you out of here with a little food for thought, a couple questions you can contemplate. How can you be more of an active participant in your own success instead of a passive observer of others? Second question, what can you do to garner more attention for your brand? And make no mistake about it, you are a brand. Even if you're an employee somewhere, you are a brand. And lastly, how can you stand out instead of drowning in your industry? It's a commoditized, crowded industry. Whatever industry you're working in, they all are today. So how can you stand out instead of drowning in that sea of sameness in your industry? Just a couple things to think about. I think Sturgill's a great example. What you can do with limited resources and taking, an opportunity to create your own news. So that's what I got for you this week. If you want to comment, rate the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever you're consuming this. And if you want to see a full video of Sturgill busking, it's a 48-minute video, or you want to read the article that I wrote, you can go to my website, coachbrew.com, or my Facebook page, facebook.com/coachbrew. It's all right there. And make it a great week. Catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Coach Brew Show. If you're not currently subscribed to the podcast, sign up now on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And for more information to turn your potential into performance, head on over to coachbrew.com now.